So after that month of, just kind of pondering life and what was going to be next, I just kind of set my eyes on this next milestone of, well, let's make $1 million in a year. That was kind of just a nice round number. Sounded fun. It would be great to achieve that. And in 2 years, I did it pretty quickly, a combination of holding property and flipping the properties I didn't want to hold. We grossed $1 million. And I ran across a guy. I went to what was this called? I don't know, some entrepreneur convention where you got at different round tables with some business expert. And the question had come around to me, or the microphone came around to me, and they said, "What's your biggest challenge?" I said, "Well, you know what? I created a 7-figure year. Now, I guess just the next logical step would be, how do I do an 8-figure year? I don't know how to do that." And so I connected with somebody there and eventually hired him to be my mentor. And the thing that he had told me right off the beginning, once you hit that $1 million mark, if you want to make more, it's about doing less.
Welcome to the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. And now your hosts, Stephen White and Eric Worrell.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Rent Prep for Landlords. You got Steve and I here. How you doing, Steve?
Pretty good, man. I'm excited for today's guest.
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of guests on recently, so I'm excited to have this particular guest on. We were reached out to, and they said, do you guys want to have a guest in your podcast? We get a lot of these, and I was like, I don't know. We haven't been doing that much lately, but turns out that our guest, Matt Theriault, is a former Marine, and right. Steve, you're a former Marine, both in real estate related capacities, and I was like, we got to have him on.
That's all I needed to hear. I was like, book him. That's it.
Yeah, let's do it. So we got Matt on the podcast. How you doing, Matt?
Very well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us here today. We're looking forward to picking your brain, and I'm going to do a little bit of some bio here on Matt. So I'm going to read some information here that we got. So Matt is a Marine Corps Desert Storm veteran who enjoyed 15 successful years in the music business as a record producer and label owner. When the digital download killed the record store, he found virtually everything that he had built become obsolete in a matter of months. The demise of his music business was swift and unforgiving to the point that Matt was forced to start life personally and professionally from square one at the age of 34. The transition from a 7-figure year job to a $7 an hour bagging groceries was a humbling one, to say the least. I got to say, I love that intro right there. That's a lot of stuff going on. I know Steve and I talk a lot about people being able to keep up with the times and adjust when things happen. And it sounds like that kind of happened with you with the digital download killing the record store. You want to kind of elaborate a little bit about what your record store is like? I mean, 7 figures a year, you had a pretty good size record store.
Yeah, no, I actually had a record label. A small
okay.
little hip hop label that had major label distribution. And we put out a record each month. It was just myself and 3 friends. We didn't get any radio play or anything on MTV, but we'd sell 30, 40,000 units every time we came out. We had a good little cult following.
Wow.
And that provided a really good lifestyle. When you cost 70 cents to manufacture and you sell it to retail for $8, there's a good little markup there. Mm-hmm. And so we had a really nice formula that just worked over and over and over again. And then one month it just didn't work nearly as well. So we threw more money at it the next month and it worked even less. And we kept throwing money at it. And then 6 months later, we had thrown all of our money at it and we're scratching our heads, had no idea what had happened. I mean, in hindsight, it's crystal clear. Mm-hmm. But at the time, we were oblivious. And, people had just, particularly in that independent music fan, whether they were independent rock fans or independent hip hop fans, something that wasn't on a major label, they really embraced that whole technology and the digital download before the general population even knew what it was. And so
that's kind of funny because it's probably going in the reverse now. Because if you're kind of in that indie music scene now, it's I got friends that are kind of hipsters that listen to records.
Right.
So maybe back in the day they were jumping on digital when no one knew what it was.
Right.
No, it is kind of cool to listen to vinyl again, but we're certainly not selling the 30, 40,000 like we were back then.
Right.
Yeah. So looking more into your notes here. So you started bagging groceries for $7 an hour, and it's a pretty humbling experience. And then I'm reading here that you had a pretty unlikely mentor. Do you want to explain kind of what happened with that, who this mentor was to you?
Sure. Yeah. I was 34 when I started bagging groceries, and the mentor being the grocery store manager, who coincidentally was also 34. And he started bagging groceries there when he was 16 years old. And he was only 2 years away from his pension, pulling out, I think, 80%. He'd had 20 years there and was going to pull out 80% of his pension, just quit. And as we connected just because our age similarities, and he knew my story, and I had told him, I just want my money back. I just want my lifestyle back. And I don't know what else to do. I didn't even train for music, and it just kind of happened. Now I got to go learn how to do something. And he called me up to his office and kind of opened up his little portfolio, told me his plan about his pension. And then he opened up this little book, a picture of buildings. He had 6, I think, multifamily properties that he'd been able to acquire over the last 18 years working at the grocery store. And he showed me his cash flow, how it was going to actually exceed his extension or his pension.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. And he gave me this one quote, and I've probably said it 1,000 times. We just did a live event back in Indianapolis last week, and one of the students actually repeated it verbatim back to me, and it was really funny. So I guess I've said it a lot. But it's real estate is the final frontier where the average person has a legitimate shot at creating real wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, I felt far below average. And I was like, wow, if that's the final frontier, I better figure out how that works. So that was the unlikely mentor, the grocery store manager, that pushed me towards real estate.
All right. And now you have your own podcast, the Epic Real Estate Investing Show, and you've done a ton of different deals. Can you just give us like a quick rundown of from that point where you're thinking about real estate to where you are today? What have you built up? And then after we're done talking about that, I want to talk to you about, how you can introduce business systems to grow your own real estate business. But just kind of curious about, you had nothing, just an idea now thinking about real estate to where you are today. What does that look like?
Sure. So I think by the day after he had shared that with me, I'd gone home from work, grabbed a bottle of wine, sat in front of the computer, and just started searching everything real estate, trying to educate myself on the subject, and ran across an estranged aunt, an aunt I hadn't seen in probably 15 years. And she just happened to be the #1 real estate agent just 2 cities over and had been for almost 30 years. And I was at the bottom of my bottle of wine, so I had a little bit of liquid courage in me and fired off an email. And she responded in the morning, and we had lunch that day. And I think within 24 hours, I was enrolled in school to be a real estate agent. And so that's how it began. And after about 4 years of being a real estate agent, I just kind of picked my head up and looked around, scratched my head a little bit, and said, you know what, if real estate is where the final frontier for this creating wealth thing is at, I think I'm sitting on the wrong side of the desk. And because I'd had some clients that were doing very well for themselves, it seemed like they had a whole lot more time off than I did because I was working for them. And I was like, all right. So I made a new commitment at that moment that I was no longer going to represent other people in the buying and selling of their real estate, and I was only going to represent myself. So I made a hefty investment in my own real estate investing education. Thank God I found a really good program, right? My first choice. And during that education, I was introduced to that little book. You've probably never heard of it, called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's a good book. You should check it out.
Yeah. Okay. I'm writing that down now.
Yeah.
Yeah, write that down. And I just got introduced to this whole concept of passive income. Obviously I speak English. I know what passive, I know what income means, but I never really had that concept as like something to pursue. And he gave you, the author gave you the formula of how to escape the rat race to create real financial independence. And it just really resonated with me because of where I'd come from. I'd made a lot of money, but I was still trapped. Like I was always dependent on that next release each month from the music label. I was like, this time I'm going to do it differently. And so I just focused on every transaction through that education. How can I turn this into a stream of income? I was very anti-flipping. I kind of did the math and saw, wow, if I flip the property, I'm actually slowing myself down. Even if I put a large chunk of money in my pocket, it's slowing my journey to the end, slowing my escape. So I just embraced the concept of that book. And I would say in 3.5 years, with a combination of pushing down my expenses and increasing my passive income, I was quote unquote free. I had escaped the rat race per that definition.
Very cool. What did that feel like when you realized that you're at that point where you're just like, yeah, I'm there?
That's good. I've told that story several times, and you're the only one that asked me, how did that feel? And it felt good initially. And I essentially was, wow, I don't have to go to work today. I don't have to report to anybody. I don't have to answer to anybody. And that was my life for about 30 days. And I hit a point where, wow, is this it? I'm kind of bored. What's next? Like I was really fidgety. I was really anxious. And so, that feeling of escape, it was great. I think the day, maybe the first week that it happened, But it slowly waned, and just started looking around like, wow, you can only watch so much TV and hit so many buckets of golf balls at the driving range before you're looking for something else more exciting to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know we definitely come across it a lot where even people with similar stories as you, where they've built up this portfolio and they don't need to go to work. And it's just like, well, what do we do now? And it's kind of, you get to the top of the mountain, you enjoy the view, and then you're like, well, I got to climb something else now.
I think what happens is you work so hard, you push so hard to get to the top of the mountain that now it's ingrained in you. That's who you are. You're the type of person that works and pushes, and you can't just stop that. That becomes who you are. Yeah,
you've heard that expression probably several times like I have. It's not the journey, it's who you become along the way. Mm-hmm. And until you actually, hit at least one mountain peak, you don't really know what that means. And you look back and like, wow, I am a totally different person capable of totally new and different things.
Yeah, it's funny. Something that I get a lot, I don't know if you do either, but I'm a business owner, and people are always making this ridiculous assumption like, oh, you must just be able to show up at work when you want or do whatever you want. I'm like, yeah, technically, I guess, maybe, but it's just not who I am. I can't just, decide I'm going to take a week off this week, or I'm not going to show up this week, or there's still an accountability that you feel. And again, like, you said, the journey makes you who you are and what you become. So I think sometimes people have these fantasies of getting into real estate that it's going to create this freedom and everything else. And in some ways it certainly does, but in a lot of ways it gives you purpose. And then that freedom, maybe of time, you're just using it better, but you're not necessarily retired or doing nothing or ever want to be either.
So Matt, one of the things that interested me when I kind of got your bio here and some of the topics that you're really well informed on was that one of the things that you talk to a lot of people about is how to make your business systems. How do you create your business systems, and how do you make them work for you? And this kind of stuck out to me because RentPrep is doing very well. Thank you to our listeners who start using our service for background checks, and we're growing. And of course, when you grow, you start seeing the pains of that growth too. It's not all just making more money. There's those growing pains. So, what kind of growing pains did you experience from the point of growing your portfolio, and what kind of business systems did you put in place to help address that?
So when I got this escape from the quote unquote rat race, I wasn't wealthy by any means. I just had enough passive income to cover my monthly expenses. So after that month of, kind of pondering life and what was going to be next, I just kind of set my eyes on this next milestone of, well, let's make $1 million in a year. That was kind of just a nice round number. Sounded fun. It would be great to achieve that. And in 2 years, I did it pretty quickly, a combination of holding property and flipping the properties I didn't want to hold. We grossed $1 million. And I ran across a guy. I went to what was this called? I don't know, some entrepreneur convention where you got at different round tables with some business expert. And the question had come around to me, or the microphone came around to me, and they said, what's your biggest challenge? I said, well, you know what? I created a 7-figure year. Now, I guess just the next logical step would be, how do I do an 8-figure year? I don't know how to do that. And so I connected with somebody there and eventually hired him to be my mentor. And the thing that he had told me right off the beginning, once you hit that $1 million mark, if you want to make more, it's about doing less. And at the time, that just really, I didn't know what that meant. Like, what do you mean I do less and I'm going to make more money? And so he walked me down this whole process of system creation, delegation, automation, outsourcing. And I remember that session, like we just wrote down every single thing. When I say we, my wife and I, we wrote down every single thing that we do on a daily basis with regards to our business. Every single task. We got ultra detailed, and he's like, what else? What else? What else? And just when we think we'd said it all, he said, what else? And we'd come up with more. So we had this giant whiteboard just filled with all these tasks. And then he went around and started grouping all of those things together, like in categories. So I think we came up with like 4 different categories. And he just kind of said, Matt, which one do you want? And I chose one, and Mercedes said she chose what she wanted. And then so we had these 2 others left over that we didn't want to do. And so then the next part of that process was to go ahead and document exactly how we do all of those things, creating SOPs. Standard operating procedures. And so we did that for those 2 other tasks. And now we had basically a job description and a manual for that job of how to perform that. And we went out and started hiring people. And that's kind of where it worked. And I've started to understand, oh, okay, so yeah, I get it. Now I'm doing less, but we're accomplishing more because we have 2 other people doing stuff for us. And particularly they're doing the stuff that we didn't want to do anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you make it sound so simple too, the way you just kind of broke that down. I love that. Have you, talking to real estate investors, have you noticed now, because I'm sure you've probably spoken to many over the years through your podcast at the Epic Real Estate Investing Show. Have you noticed like a point where people really tend to get to where they need to start thinking about this and doing this? Because I'm sure we have people listening where they're like, this might be me, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for it. I mean, would you have any advice if somebody's thinking that as they're listening to this right now?
Yeah, I think when you hit that level of whether you're flipping or holding, you're conducting 2 to 3 transactions a month. From my experience, that's an overwhelming gig over the long haul for one person. So I think if you're doing 2 or 3 transactions a month and you're doing it all by yourself, it's time to really start thinking about bringing in some help.
Okay. Now, that process that you just laid out, was that something that you just did in an afternoon with this person, your mentor with you? Or like, how long did it take you to do all that? Because when I think about doing these types of things, I mean, creating standard operating procedures sounds like hell on earth. Like just the idea of documenting, and it sounds so tedious and like, oh, I can just do it if I just do it myself faster. And I feel like that's the trap that I can fall into sometimes. Right. How long did it take you to do all this?
That was probably a few-week process, and it was painful. You're absolutely right, Eric. It was something that I wasn't looking forward to, and halfway through it, I was like a little crying baby. I don't want to do this anymore, you know? And but we had a good guide, and he just led us through the whole thing. And, we came out on the other end. Like, that's what, I don't know, 7 years ago? That's the only way we do business now. And we've got, I think, 8 employees now.
Yeah.
And they're all responsible for their own manual, so to speak. Anytime they come up with a new strategy or a new approach, or we get a new piece of technology or just a better way of doing things, it's their responsibility to update their manual. So it's always current. They're doing it, not us. So we only had to do those first 2. And then we delegated that to the people who actually hold those positions to keep their manual current.
Yeah, pretty genius. And I know standard operating procedures or SOPs is something that you obviously we're aware of in the Marines too. And it is kind of funny. I mean, that's exactly how the Marine Corps operates as well. I mean, you get new operators that come in and out, move in and out of a job, and you have to have that SOP identified of exactly what it is that they're doing. So it's a lot of similarities. So I think that you had a really good groundwork laid to help you become successful, maybe just from some experience in the Marine Corps as well.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there was an order of everything that you had to do on a daily basis in the Marine Corps. And, you go, just if you take boot camp, for example, you jump off the bus, you land on the yellow footprints, and from that point forward, the drill instructors were just following an SOP of how to lead you through the next, at 13, 14 weeks so that you become a Marine at the end of that whole process. And that is something I've always looked back on. Because, I look back like on the day-to-days, and you're waking up and you're just tired and you're like, is this over yet? And there was no real significant transformational experience. It was, 3 to 4 months of these small little steps all compounded that produced the result. And that's something I've really taken from the Marine Corps as far as producing any result that I'm looking to produce.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if I ever thought of my drill instructors as following a procedure, man. I feel like they went off script all the time. Just some of the crazy stuff that they would say or do. Like, I don't think that this seems really off the books here. I don't know if they're allowed to do this sort of stuff.
Yeah. But you know what? It was all in context. If they,
100%.
freestyled here and there, it was all in context of a procedure for sure.
Yeah. 100%.
So not being a Marine myself, I feel like some of the listeners might be wondering the same thing. Was there legit yellow footprints right off the bus? So like it would tell you like step here, step here, step here.
You get off the bus, they tell you get on the yellow footprints, you put your feet in the yellow footprints. I don't know if when you were in, Matt, if they called it the same thing, but especially in the beginning of boot camp, everything was broken down Barney style, right? Like the kids show, like here's exactly what you do, and right down to the yellow footprints. That way you can't screw it up. They ingrain you in that way. This is exactly how we want you to do it. Everything's a procedure.
100%.
Now, just because I do end up hearing different Marine sayings, and we'll pick the clean ones here for the podcast. But I feel like I always hear, Steve, what's the one you're always saying if you don't know the answer to something?
That's the only right answer is either the right answer or I do not know the answer at this time and I will find out for you and get back to you. That's sort of the office policy of if we're talking to landlords and we don't know the answer, don't BS your way through it. It's, I don't know the answer. I will get back to you. And that was something that I've learned in the Marines as part of our inspection. If we had a commanding officer, company, XO or whoever it was that was doing the inspection and they would ask you something and you didn't know, you better not give them the wrong answer or some BS answer. The only answer then is either the correct one or I'll find out for you. I don't know.
Matt, I'm curious, is there like a certain mantra or something that we haven't already discussed that you've picked up from the Marines that you really find like you've infused into your business and that has helped you to this day?
Yeah, if we went back to that same kind of scenario of jumping off the bus into onto the yellow footprints and just being in a world of total bewilderment, total culture shock, but having someone to being with a community of like-minded people that are on the same mission as you, and then having a leader that's going to take you through that process, someone that's been there and done that. I look for that type to create that type of environment for anything new that I want to accomplish. Like I know it's going to be new. I know it's going to be uncomfortable and awkward in the beginning of whatever it is that I'm looking to achieve or learn. And so I look for people I'm intentional about creating my environment with a bunch of other people on yellow footprints. And I'm intentional about within that crowd trying to find the person who has the experience and make it a point not to reinvent the wheel and trust that person that has been there before. So, we've done so many other things with our business. Like we've got this big Instagram presence. We've got the podcast, for example. We've got an educational platform now. We've got an actual fund. And every single one of those new things, that was a brand new experience for me. So I was like, okay, who else is doing this? How do I get around people that are doing the same thing? Who do I find that can help me get there? And, and just follow along. And I think that's just a huge accelerator of progress, right? When you do it in that way, rather than trying to figure out how to do everything yourself.
100%. And I know, now, of course, we live in a day and age of social media and communities and podcasts, and it's much easier for people to connect to like-minded people. But when I first started in the real estate industry, I was such a huge, and still am today, to make no mistake, but such a huge advocate for local groups, local landlord groups, local real estate investor groups, just a place to get around like-minded people, a place to find mentors, a place to model, after somebody that's, like you said, been there, done it, doing it successfully. And, I really think that is probably the number one key to success, to finding, to making it in real estate, because there's so many mistakes to be made that if you don't have somebody guiding you at least a little bit and saying, oh, no, don't do that. I've done that before. That's a mistake. You might not be able to pull out of some of the mistakes that are out there that you can fall into.
Yep. I think that Mark Twain has a quote, learn from other people's mistakes because you won't be here long enough to make them all on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt about it.
I love it. Well, Matt, if people, I know we've mentioned him a few times here, but if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about Epic Real Estate, where would you tell them to go?
Yeah. So if they're listening to you, they obviously know how to find a podcast. So Epic Real Estate Investing is the name of the show. And then our presence online is epicrealestate.com.
Give us a quick synopsis of what the show is like. Do you have guests on there that come on and talk about the real estate deals?
Yeah. So we started as once a week show. We've grown to 4 days a week. And on Mondays, we show people how to go out and do the real estate themselves, from with regard to generating leads, to taking those leads, converting them to contracts, taking those contracts and exit them in the best way that they get the highest and best profit for themselves. So those are kind of Mondays. Tuesday, I'm joined by my tax attorney, where we discuss tax hacking. We call it Tax Hacker Tuesday. And then on Thursdays, we have something called Thought Leader Thursday, which is a little bit more of a general business, general entrepreneurship, inspiration, motivational, tactical type interview where I have guests. And then Friday is Financial Freedom Friday, which is really geared for the busy professional who doesn't, doesn't want to stay doing what he's doing for the rest of his life, and we help him how to accelerate that. So those are our 4 main days, our 4 themes, and we're just starting something now on Wednesday, so we'll be 5 days a week. We're filming our own little reality show here in our office.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah, we're taking on a new asset class to generate $10,000 of passive income within the next 12 months. And so we're still maintaining our education business. We still maintain our turnkey business. We're still maintaining our normal fund and investing efforts. And we're just kind of demonstrating how anyone can do this on a part-time basis. So this is just a few hours a week that we've geared just for this, and we're documenting the whole thing just to show people how to do it. So that'll be on Wednesdays. So we'll be Monday through Friday here very shortly.
So that's going to be, you're going to be doing a podcast for that, and you're also be like, would that be on YouTube or Instagram, or like where can people follow along on that?
Yeah, so we're on YouTube as well at epicrei.tv. That'll take you right to our YouTube channel.
Very cool. There's so much content for people to absorb. So if you're listening, you like Matt's story. I mean, I feel like just from the little bit we're talking to you, we're writing down some notes as we're going. So check it out. Matt, thank you so much for being on the podcast here today. We appreciate your time and your insights.
You bet, Eric. Thank you. Steve, thank you.
Yeah, great having you on. Semper Fi.
Hoorah!